This is another story from the top of my head about the Titanic. This is going to be in the view of Harold Bride. He was a junior operator with John. In the story, what happens is that even though Skylar is proposed to John, she kind of gets feelings for Harold and they kiss, and John sees it. And when the Titanic does hit the iceberg, he understands what he has to do. This is when they're on the Carpathia, the ship that rescued them, and he's waiting for the last lifeboat to come in. He doesn't know if she survived, because the last time he saw her, she was on the Titanic and she couldn't get down. He knows that John is dead, and this is what he sees. This is just at the top of my head. I don't know how long this will get. This is in his view. Okay. I sat there on the Carpathia watching all the familiar faces come on board. Women were screaming out their husbands' names, their children, and as I sat there, just as the people fixed my feet, and as I watched the 3 Murphy children and the new one Skylar had picked up, they shared stories about how they lost their mother, and then as faintly as I could hear them whisper, they talked about how Skylar was like another mother. They talked about how pretty she was and how her husband, John, had perished. They cried and they prayed that she would come on, but they had not seen her yet, just like how their mother said they would come back and she never did. They had huddled together, all 4 of them. It did not matter what they were, what they looked like, how old they were. It was as if that the hope of finding someone you loved brought them together. And Harold sat. Delete Harold sat. When I saw the first lifeboat turn on, as it rose silently, as everyone huddled in front of me to see if they could find their loved ones. There was only 6 on that lifeboat. It was the only lifeboat at 20 to come back for the people that were stranded in that water. As I scanned over everyone's heads and I looked down, I saw that familiar red hair that I had grown to love, and I could just feel my heart fall, because as I looked over at the little child Skylar had picked up right before they had fallen and Skylar was trapped on board the Titanic, he saw the blood that was Skylar's. He wondered if she had bled to death. But he watched as the boat came closer and closer, and he could see the familiar face that was holding Skylar's head in his chest. It was the man that John had known, and he had also known Skylar before even the Titanic. They sat together at brunch one time as they joked about a little pub down the street, and he could just see the sadness in his face as they stowed closer and closer. As they helped people out, the man got up, having Skylar in his arms, and he held her so gently, but knew he would never let her go. And as I watched, I felt if he had loved her too, but was never able to tell John. That kind of left a hole in my heart, thinking that she was probably loved by many men. I watched him, you see, as he made sure her feet never touched any of the metal, and as more as I could hear women still screaming, because I knew that was the last lifeboat and everyone must have perished. It always shocked me that I never really seen that. I never expected it. I never really cared. But now that I watched that man walk up the ramp with her, and knowing that she had just lost her fiance, I could feel the sadness that everyone else was feeling. When he entered the deck, people were running, trying to greet other people or people they had known, and he blocked them, keeping Skylar safe. And he laid her on a clear spot with no towel, no nothing. And the Murphy kids and the poor little lass that was a stranger to us, all gathered around, and they all shut out crying. I had to see what was going on, and as I did, I wish I had it. Her face was so pale. It did not look like the face that I've seen for the past 5 and 4 days. Her red cheeks were now icy. Her lips were blue, and blood was frozen to her head and her hair that was wrapped around her body. Her long red hair just was knotted and blood clotted in it. And I saw her dress as it was ripped and still dripping with blood. And he wondered what had happened. Had someone pushed her when she fell? Did she hit something? And he looked over at the little girl that he had only met just 4 hours ago. And she did not know English. She only knew the Irish. And she leaned down and she touched Skylar's face and she said something I figured out long ago. She said she might have lost her mother and that Skylar might have lost Joseph, but she had gained more. She had gained 4 children that had now owed her life to them, and a man that loved her. And we all laugh, and I still laugh at that, thinking that the kids must have told them that. It took a while for Skylar to revive, as we all sat there and I talked to the man, Mikey, and he told me how long he had just kept her in her arms and was never going to let her go, no matter what. We talked about John, and I had to tell him that John did not make it and how his body was taken away. John, now that I think about it, was a good man. After Captain Smith told us to leave, he stayed there for 10 to 15 minutes. And I remember that worst thing. A man snuck in and was trying to take Jack's jacket, and we punched him. We knew that I'd known that he died. When Skylar revived, she was screaming out, "Sarah, Sarah, Sarah," and we all knew that was Murphy's children's mother's name. She was screaming as loud as she can, calling more crowds around. She was thrashing around as if she was covered in spiders. No one could stop her. It was a shock that had happened. Her head was cut open to right here to right there. And as many years went by, the little girl, her name, who was Mary, she told us of what happened. She told us as the Titanic lifted up, as like that, and as it broke in half, and as her mother fell down into the hole, into the icy water, crushed, that her and Skylar had fallen off, and she had hit her head on one of the propellers, which cut her scalp open. And somehow, out of all that mess, Skylar had shown Mary where the lifeboat was with John and Harold and the 3 Murphy children. She lifted her up, but when all the other survivors had seen the new lifeboat, they swarmed it. And Harold remembered, because he remembered seeing Skylar being pushed away with that lifeless face on her look as she knew that she was going to die. Then he wondered how she would have made it. And now, sorry, that was third person, mind me. Now that when I see her and our grandchildren, and the 3 Murphy kids and theirs, and sometimes when we get letters from Mary showing little kids, we kind of just sit together and we stare. And that lifeless face I had seen on that deck, and as she was drifting away, with only the lifeboat letting her float, I see wrinkles showing how much life she had lived. I see smile every time our grandchildren takes a step. And it always makes me wonder how this would have happened to me